Important aspects of IT project delivery, just to set the landscape a little bit. IT leaders have a complex job. They manage the entire technology infrastructure and all related things around that to help an organization be its most effective and most efficient. Now, done well, it can create significant competitive advantages for an organization and make it leap ahead of its competition. Now, the challenge at a high level is IT has operational things and day-to-day things that have to happen. And very often, those things take precedence or take over because of the urgency and the nature of keeping the lights on, et cetera. Oftentimes, strategic efforts and projects do get overshadowed or sometimes put on the back burner because of that operational urgency. To preclude that and make sure the organization gets to where it wants to get, we need to better prioritize and accommodate that and identify what resources are needed to be successful across the board and balance our needs between operational and more strategic projects and things we need to do. So some of the challenges we have in delivering projects in IT are fairly universal in this one, resource constraints, but IT has its own unique set and variety of resources that it has to manage. Not only just people, but hardware, software, funding, and a lot of things dependent on external vendors many times for these. Now, finding the right balances of resources to complete the project within our constraints and deliver the outcomes that we want can be a challenge, especially when they're pulled into more operational things, as we had mentioned, and there's competing priorities. The uncertainty, we live in an uncertain age and change is rapid, and IT often gets involved in complex and rapidly changing technologies as part of their projects. And sometimes it makes it difficult to predict outcomes, or technology bases can change over the lifespan of a project, even something that's not that very long. And this uncertainty can make it difficult to plan, execute, and control a project effectively. Then there's stakeholder management. There's lots of stakeholders involved here. Essentially, there's different needs and competing interests and priorities for these stakeholders. And this can be a challenge to manage across that and meet the needs of all those and consider to be a success across the board. But we need to have some things to help ensure or better ensure that stakeholders are aligned with both the organizational goals of what the reason organizationally we want to get to and the project goals themselves to make sure that those outcomes are realized and recognized by all. And then there's risk. IT projects are inherently risky by their nature. And to basically identify and assess them and manage them effectively, we need a systematic approach and a way to have visibility into them so that we factor those in and try to catch them before they turn into real issues or real detriments or blockers to our projects. There's also in IT complex dependencies, meaning there's a lot of interrelating things that need to come into play, whether they're dependencies, associations, or even things that have to be factored in. They can even go into making decisions on what you decide to approve out of your funnel of intake of possible ideas and requests that you have. And these things can include elements of your enterprise and business architecture. And then committing to the strategic projects like we talked about, in addition to the day-to-day operational activities that you have, can be a challenge when we're asked to do more with less. And sometimes we have smaller teams than we ever had. Now, if we don't achieve the right balance, the challenge here is that we'll have missed opportunities, and there is an opportunity or a real cost to the organization that we might have that may be a consequence that we don't want to realize. And so we want to make sure that those projects on your longer term to-do list, the ones that are more strategic, that we don't defer those to our detriment. Now, to do that, one of the things you might want to put in place is some measure of prioritization. Now, I'm not prescribing that this might be the specific way, and many organizations have their own way that they do their prioritization today. But you have to have a method to address demand that comes in. And we often, in IT, we always get more demand than we can possibly do. And we have to be able to prioritize competing candidate investment proposals against one another, maybe have some common valuation method so we can determine which ones we should do ahead of others. Now, some of the factors that you might consider in a kind of a weighted scoring model might be how well it strategically aligns with the organizational goals or their digital business goals and objectives. What business process impact, for example, is it going to be so impactful that we can't accommodate it right now? because the change is so sweeping? Or do we need to totally redesign our business processes so that we can succeed with this project and get the benefits of what we're trying to accomplish here? Technical architecture. Is there integration required? Is there the scalability and resilience of databases and systems out there and applications so that we can accommodate what we're going to do with this project? That we have to do these things in harmony with one another such that we can achieve the end goal together at the end line. And the direct payback and the value that we're going to get from a project. For example, conventionally understood financial benefits, there's softer cost savings, there's competitive advantage, other paybacks that we hope to achieve with these types of things. And then risk avoidance, identification of the organization's tolerance for risk. Some projects are much more riskier than others. And the idea that should factor into an overall score based on the nature and the risk tolerance of your organization. So overall, the key here is to have some prioritization mechanism and some funnel that brings some order to the chaos of all the things that come in. Now, portfolio design should probably use your overall business and enterprise architecture. And to succeed in achieving desired outcomes, the leaders of these aspects must contribute to the portfolio design using business architecture to close the strategy to execution gap, because there is a gap today where many organizations have execution portfolios of projects that they're doing and not necessarily are well aligned to the strategic goals and objectives and the vision of the organization. Now, the Gartner Group put out a publication about how to design strategic portfolios using business architecture. One of the key findings is that if you do not collaborate with the enterprise architecture elements of this and the folks responsible for that in the execution of initiatives, we may not align to or mature to the capabilities critical for the organization's future state where we want to get to. Because if one does not keep up with the other or factor in the other, we could end up with a failure and no benefit at the end of the day. And sometimes if they're not aligned, portfolio decisions are uninformed because the views have not been tailored to meet the executive's needs, and they may or may not get what they want out of the effort and or the system. And oftentimes it's the smaller undetected changes, not the large big bang of types of disruptions that cause our portfolio strategies to diverge and further create that gap bigger than it was to start with. Now, from a recommendation perspective, Gartner says that we need to ensure that portfolios are aligned with business outcomes by using techniques that help us collaborate with strategic portfolio leaders, the ones that are actually setting the course for the organization. And we also need to identify and help fulfill the portfolio design by giving executives the information they want so they have a comfort level that we're tracking well on how to achieve those things and that we're working on the right things to help to achieve those things. And then we also have to be flexible, and we have to have ongoing portfolio and roadmap refinement and be flexible and adaptable enough so that we can adjust to changing situations, changing technologies, changing direction by our leadership based upon marketplace changes, etc. And we want to make sure that we do this in a way so that we remain in alignment and don't diverge from our enterprise strategy. So overcoming some IT project management challenges, unlike other project managers in other industries, project managers face unique challenges in IT that may not affect other PMs in other areas. Communications with multiple suppliers and vendors. With technology, oftentimes you have software, hardware, services vendors, etc. And each one acts really as a stakeholder in your project. And if we if we're not aligned with their processes or they're aligned with ours, it can impact our ability to deliver. And there's the speed of progress, which I alluded to earlier on. Advancing technology can overtake a project. This can lead us to, in the midst of our project, maybe multiple times review the specifications, figure out how a new technology aspect can be enhanced into the final product. And we have to address this because sometimes customers will demand it, and they don't want something to be already outmoded or maybe deficient with available technology when you deliver the project at the end of the day. So you may be forced to include these things, and it's a disruptor. There are complex dependencies between the IT components. So whether it be hardware, software, versions and releases that you have from third-party vendors, whether it be things in your enterprise architecture or your networks, these things all have to be factored in, and it leads to complexity. And oftentimes with technologies, it comes down, if we have to incorporate these things or we embark upon a project for the first time, this first time use, we're learning as we go. There's a demand to get this up and running in our organization. And maybe, we're not exactly experts yet on getting these things deployed. And this learning curve can potentially slow down any progress occurring during a project's execution. And that could even be more so if it's unexpected, when you have to incorporate maybe some new technology that you weren't planning on when you first embarked upon the project. So changing priorities, those happen for a variety of reasons, and we need to be able to adapt to those things, and we need to have mechanisms and visibility to alert us to that, and then give us good ways to evaluate alternatives so that we can get to where we want to get to. And then just changes in your overall IT infrastructure can impact these things in your project as well. So a lot of times, traditional projects that are happening in other industries don't face these same types of disruptions, and many of them are unique to the IT world. Now, on top of that, with the ready availability of cloud-based tools and other software that's available that may not be as well controlled by IT as you would like. Oftentimes there's different areas of IT that are doing things based on their own needs. And there's, service management components. There's the project management piece we're here to talk about today. There's application management, there's infrastructure and facilities and all kinds of other things. And just these three silos here would indicate that there's different types of work and different aspects of this as we look at this more holistically that can impact one another. And if we don't have the right visibility and we don't have the right intake and selection, we don't have the right strategy alignment, we could often be working on trying to solve the same problem with duplicate projects in each of these different areas within IT and not even know it. So the idea is, how do we get that single pane of glass and mitigate that? Because if we're not on the same page, we can end up with technology-driven challenges that provides a complex maze. And if that data is not connected and we have different systems and spreadsheets and things all over the place in the different areas of IT, we could end up with these consequences, and dysfunction that will impact our ability to deliver. It might impact our customer satisfaction, and the real impacts are, the dysfunction that it causes, and it can affect our employees. It can generate, happiness and turnover and all kinds of things. So the idea is we really want to get our hands on it before we have these negative consequences bite us. So, it really comes down to, at first, taking what we really thought of as traditional portfolio management in the past, or PPM, and where we got good visibility and better visibility into our projects and allocating resources across them and such. Many organizations are just now getting into the notion of aligning strategy better with the portfolio and with the execution so that we can have success in the right areas and in the right way. And then we need to have a shared objectives with our business strategists with the execution pieces, such that as Gartner Group describes it, it's a set of processes, the strategic alignment and the strategic portfolio management, involving people, strategy, and the operations piece of IT. And as a system, so it's a system of strategy development, then planning, and then organizational alignment around those plans, and then operational plans and project plans, et cetera, that we are monitoring and learning as we go and adapting if things change, and making sure that we execute and deliver things that the customers want and need and deliver the right value at the end of the day. So strategic portfolio management, which is, the acronym is SPM, Gartner defines it as a set of business capabilities, processes, and supporting portfolio management technology. And if you look at the graphic here on the right, there are the objectives and the strategies, there are key results, there are different work efforts, and there's projects and epics and specific features you might deliver as part of software values. And there's other things like products and business capabilities and value streams you're aligned with for continuous delivery. All these things come into play in many of your more complex cross-functional IT projects. So leadership requires SPM, or strategic portfolio management, to support enterprise-wide strategy to execution, alignment, and adaptation, because IT projects aren't by their nature isolated in an isolated world. There are your business stakeholders and the people that you are doing many of these projects for that have to be in alignment, and they're actually potentially active participants in not only the requirements, but also in the reviews and the user acceptance testing and all the other aspects of that you have to get them involved. And the definition of key business strategies and the desired outcomes have to map to more than just the projects and the resources and the tasks. There are things you have to factor in, like business capabilities, programs, your digital and physical products, the applications that might have to be addressed, and even other projects that you may be dependent on in order to arrive at the finish line successfully. And so we have to capture and define the business strategies, manage the execution of the initiatives and the projects, and then factor in the core functional assets or IT assets that may be required to deliver on our vision. And ultimately, it's the leadership who sets the direction in your organization that we want to align with, right? We want to get to the end of the day where they want the organization to go. You have the IT and functional management who own the critical assets and the infrastructure here in IT that we're talking about. And the execution teams are the execution teams in maybe an IT organization, an IT PMO that basically has to deliver on these things and track and provide progress and reporting on all of that. So why is this important? Well, it's important because our environment just keeps getting more complex and the pace of change keeps accelerating. So as they become more complex and uncertain, we have to be always monitoring and managing risk, optimizing the portfolios continuously to make sure that they continue to be aligned with strategic goals. And there's a greater need for financial and resource optimization. We're being asked to do more with less, and we got to make sure that we're putting our best resources and our dollars on the things that are going to give us the greatest value in return for the things that the organization needs. And we also have to have this because there's a real demand now for data-driven decision making. You know, it's all about analytics these days. I don't care if you're in marketing or in project management, whatever it is. And the idea is you need to have that pane of glass to provide the insights you need to make decisions. And if you're going to adjust and be flexible, you have to have the data points on which to make those decisions on. And then we have multiple methodologies. So, you know, people are using Agile or some variations of Agile or still using some waterfall types of approaches. And they may be, because of that, using different tools, spreadsheets, and other things around the organization. We got to get a handle on that. We have to make sure that we have greater visibility and hopefully get a more single pane of glass for that stuff so that we can make sure that everything's rowing in the direction of our strategic goals. And then emerging technologies and business models. You know, IT is there to deliver value as a strategic partner in the business. And if the organization needs to adapt to the new digital age and find new ways to deliver their products, the new ways to reach customers, the new ways to transact business out in the marketplace, we need to be there to help them do that because we're the key component in IT that makes that happen. Now, OnePlan, as a solution, provides a path to full strategic portfolio management for the enterprise. We basically have for the business leaders the ability to, you know, document the strategy. We can put objectives and key results in here and be able to identify the key value streams that we want to manage to and put those in the solution as our North Star and guiding post for where we want to go as an organization. We have the tools for the execution leaders, the portfolio managers, et cetera, that need to support the selection and the planning and the execution of all this. And regardless of whatever methodology or approach is being used, or maybe some combination of all these, it might be a complex organization where you have some adaptive, which is multi-methodology, multi-framework, or multi-tools that are needed to support the execution, or professional services automation, or more agile, strictly agile approaches, or maybe even more product-oriented development. Those things can all be accommodated in OnePlan. And then the functional leaders, the ones that own the assets and the resources and the enterprise architecture and the application portfolio and the product portfolio, there's tools in here for them so that we can align these things all together as needed. Now, OnePlan can meet you where you're at. You know, this is an evolution for many organizations, and many are not, you know, ready to have all components of this put in place. But you can take a crawl, walk, run approach to this. You can adopt the things that you can adopt and then aspire in a roadmap type of fashion, in a phased approach, to adopt the things that you want to do in this later on. So what capabilities does OnePlan have to help enable the things that I'm talking about? Well, on the intake and upfront side things, OnePlan does have strategy execution where you can outline the strategies and the objectives and the key results that leadership wants to see the organization achieve. We can actually identify enterprise architecture elements. We are not a full enterprise architecture repository, but we can either outline those things here in the way that an organization that doesn't have an enterprise architecture tool may want to, or we can use our connector technology to bring in components from an enterprise architecture solution or repository that you already have in place. And then out of those generally come ideas and requests that are hopefully aligned with where we want to go or where we are as an organization, and have that one common funnel, that one place that people can go, not scattered ad hoc emails, but a place where we can evaluate, put scoring against those types of things, so that when we choose our portfolio and we want to plan that portfolio, whether it be in a more traditional list type of view or more agile boards or maybe in more roadmap types of views, we can leverage those things to make good decisions on what it is we want to execute on. Now, resources is a constraining factor, and unless we have visibility into the resource requirements and what it's going to take to get those things done, whether or not we say yes, if we can't deliver the resources, we may not be able to deliver the things that we're committing to, and we have to have our eye on that at all times. Same thing with the dollars. Do we have the dollars to do this in our financial budgets to make that happen? And are we tracking well with what we said, both plan, maybe revised forecast, actuals, etc.? And the key here, we talked about change. Being able to do what-if scenario modeling and look at alternatives without yet impacting the core production portfolio is a set of tools that you want to have in OnePlan to be able to evaluate those alternatives and model them out before you actually decide to embark upon that approach. Now, the execution side in here, obviously you have to execute, and you have to put in work plans, whether they be more waterfall plans or more agile plans with sprints and backlogs. And we have those tools right in OnePlan. We don't really require other planning tools, but if you do have others that you've adopted and you're kind of committed to, we have built-in connectors for things like Microsoft Project and Smartsheet and Azure DevOps and Jira, et cetera, that we can work with, and even track those other aspects we talked about, like the issues and risks, or documenting changes and evaluating those within here. Now, the resource planning at the individual project level, we can actually have full resource negotiations with the functional managers who actually manage the individual resources and maybe determine who you get so that it rolls up into that bigger resource capacity plan I talked about in the planning phase. And then team members, feeding that in real time, my work areas, so that they can see everything that's on their plate and feed status back to the projects at any given point in time, or timesheets if you need to do that, whether it be for capitalization of labor, whether it be for chargebacks within for IT services within your organization, or maybe you're billing to external clients for your services as well. Those things are built right into the tool. And then the analysis of the reporting, whether it be individual project status reports, whether it's dashboards for at the portfolio level, at the program level, or at the resource capacity level, et cetera, or maybe even strategic execution reports. Those types of things are available in OnePlan as well. And as we get this more complex, and we have more interrelations here within the solution, visualizations of how these things all interrelate with one another and how they're associated across the board is something that's important as a natural output and something that's basic within OnePlan. Now, part of the thing we talked about in our title was our AI. And with the advent of AI, there's a couple dimensions there. One, we're leveraging our own Sophia GPT for generative AI, so that with prompts you can actually ask it to do things for you. You can ask for certain analyses that you may not be able to do readily with your own human perception. And the idea is it's available to you right within OnePlan while you're working with your projects and your portfolios and your resources, et cetera. The key is to help you select the right work to work on that's aligned with your strategy, and then execute on it well. The whole idea of AI here is interesting because it affects the portfolio, and IT's being impacted right now with projects that are coming to say, all right, how are we going to leverage this? How are we going to govern this? How are we going to incorporate this in a way in our organization that maintains our ways of doing things, but also maybe make us more efficient? And how does it impact freeing our people up to maybe do more high value activities than the things that AI might be able to do for us? We'll talk about this here today. But the key is this isn't limited to IT. IT is, many of the projects that you work on touch or have direct involvement by the actual units within the business that you are supporting or delivering to as your internal customers. And the key here is that these concepts permeate across the board and can actually foster participation for cross-functional projects across your organization or enterprise-wide initiatives or transformation initiatives. So Sophia GPT is really a purpose-built AI assistant that helps collaboration, intuitive interaction and analysis, data integration to help you formulate plans and even report on plans, and actually can help things like data entry and find anomalies and those types of things. And this is purpose-built for strategic portfolio management. It is leveraging Microsoft's Azure OpenAI within its infrastructure, which is more secure and more compliant than what you might find with ChatGPT out in the open internet. But it's also learned OnePlan, it's also learned strategic portfolio management, it's also learned the disciplines and things around that, and it can also, on a dynamic basis, leverage the data you're looking at within OnePlan as part of your analysis without storing that data or looking at or learning from it, but leveraging it to help you do your work. And it's always available in OnePlan. So at any given point in time, you can call up Sophia and give it some prompts, and we'll show you some examples of that today. Now, incorporating generative AI into overall SPM practices, it's not about changing the practices themselves, it's about making them better. So for example, streamlining portfolio intake and prioritization, we can leverage AI to help us with that. Building next generation talent, we can adapt to AI by making sure that the people that work within our organization are skilled at leveraging it to our advantage and their advantage, and making us more efficient and more effective within the organization. And in embracing disruptive technologies, if there was ever a disruptive technology that's being quickly embraced, it's AI. And much of our portfolio may be AI related here as we come down this next set of months and years upcoming, as we incorporate and find out ways to optimize the benefits for that. Now, sample use cases for AI in strategic portfolio management would include things like augmenting our strategic planning, help us optimize our portfolios. In our work management, help us with resources and tasks and timelines and things like that. Helping us assess risk a little bit better. Helping us with resource allocation and making sure we understand where we might have needs or where we might have problems. And then investment forecasting, maybe doing financial analysis and raising some issues, or giving us some help in actually building those resource plans themselves or our financial plans themselves.